All right, guys, let's go ahead and dive into eating out, how we tackle situations like this, and still continue to get results for what we're doing, right? So I think when going out, this is where people have the most anxiety because, again, they just feel like, having a meal out, going out for the night, it's going to ruin the results, which ultimately, if you are on track about 95% of the time, one meal out of, maybe like the 36 meals that you're going to have throughout the whole week, or like 20 something meals you're going to have throughout the whole week, doesn't really matter, right? If we're having 4 meals, a day for 7 days, that's 28 times 4. I'm just way off. I'm horrible with numbers, but you kind of get what I'm saying here, right? Like one meal out of all these meals isn't really going to make a difference. But if you're someone that still wants to continue to stay on track, you don't want to overdo it, here are the best tips. And here is how we tackle eating out. That way you have a good understanding of how to go into it yourself, right? So when it comes down to it, right, there's going to be days where like, I just don't want to track. I want to go out, I want to have some drinks, I want to enjoy myself. And if that is what you're choosing, go through with it. Do not feel guilty. Do not beat yourself up. Eat the damn food, move on, because it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, right? But again, if you want to still maintain a pretty good balance, here's how we recommend you guys go about it, right? So we still want to make sure that we track for the day. This isn't a day where we're going to just kind of, say, fuck it, we're going to let go of everything. We still want to have awareness of what we're doing. So what we do here is we track for 70% of the day, and then we're going to make sure that we're pretty close to our protein intake. So the way this would look like is, if I am going to go out to eat, then what I'm going to do, if my protein target's about like 150 grams, my calorie target's about 2,000 calories as a whole. What I would do here is I would have about 120 to 130 grams of protein before I even get to the meal that I'm going to go out and consume, right? The reason why is because that meal is probably going to be a little bit lower in protein. It's probably going to have, maybe like 20, 30 grams on the high end. It's probably not going to be like 40, 50 grams. So we want to make sure that we're not leaving too big of a gap there. So by having a 20 gram gap, I'm pretty sure you're going to be able to get that within that meal, right? Number two is now we're saving about, again, 30% of our calories. That would be around like 600 calories. So now we have 600 calories for that meal that we can consume, right? That's a good portion of our daily intake. Is the meal going to be higher than this? Most cases, yes. Eat it, move on, right? Ultimately, if you're over consuming 200, 300 calories, it's not really going to matter. But now you have a really good idea of where you're at as a whole, because now we have 6 days and a half tracked the data, and we can see how consistent you are. You can go out, you can have that meal, and you're good, right? So that's that. How do I track alcohol if I am having alcohol with this meal? So you have to remember that, usually every shot of, tequila, whiskey, bourbon, whatever it may be, right? It's about 100 calories. So what we do here is we account for the calories. You either track it through fats or you track it through carbohydrates. You do not want to track alcohol through protein, right? One thing we don't want to do, what we're using our calories is going to have to come through fat and through carbohydrates. So what I do here is, if I'm having a shot, then I know it's 100 calories. So I'm going to count for those 100 calories through carbohydrates. If there's 4 calories per 1 gram of carbohydrate, then we're going to need 25 grams. So that's how we track it. 25 grams of carbs, right? And that's going to give you 100 calories. If you're having a drink that has, sugars, bitters, stuff like that, it's going to have calories. So you can very easily look this up. And what I would say is pretty much just kind of average it out. If you see that, most of the drinks that are being made are around like 300, 400 calories, go for the higher end. Do the 400 calorie one, because it's going to count for the alcohol, is going to count for the carbohydrates that are coming in from, the sugars, the soda, whatever it might be, right? So we want to do that. As far as the meals go, how would you track those, right? So you got to remember, this is not going to be perfect because you yourself cannot account for everything they're using, right? You can't account for the oils. You don't know what's going on. So what we want to do here is same thing. We want to overestimate. If we look at the meal and we're like, hey, this is probably around like, 600 calories, I would track a little bit higher. I would go for 700 to 800 calories. And the reason for that being is because, again, we can't account for the oils. We can't account for the stuff that is being cooked with. So we'd rather go on the high end versus the low end. So just kind of over track just to be safe. And that's really it. That's how we would tackle it. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. You don't have to overcomplicate it. And the most important thing is you don't have to beat yourself up. Have the meal, move on. This is supposed to be a lifestyle. You're not going to be perfect 100% of the time, and you have to learn to be okay with that.